That fateful morning, I walked into the grand dining room and found them sprawled across the table, father, mother, and my cruel brother, silent, their mouths frozen in a final scream. The air was thick with death, and all I had left was my steady hands to clean the table. Yeah, I still hear their voices in my head, each one a whisper in the dark. They never knew what was coming, but I did. I had planned every detail down to the last drop of poison. This house, the Greystone Estate, wasn't just home. It was a fortress, its walls lined with secrets that no one dared speak of. My name is Clara, and I was raised in the shadows of a family that never valued me. My father, a man of power and influence, saw me as nothing more than an afterthought. My mother, the house's head cook, was a woman whose sharp eyes always seemed to know more than she let on. And my brother Henry, he was a monster, cold, calculating, and cruel. He tormented the workers, mocked them, and left them broken. But he didn't break me. I was raised on the art of food, but not in the way you think. My mother didn't just teach me to cook. She taught me to poison. She was the true master of Greystone's secret kitchens, and I was her apprentice. She knew every herb, every plant, every dangerous substance in this garden, in this place, even beauty could kill. Growing up, I never saw myself as a victim. I was the quiet one, the observer, but I watched. I watched Henry humiliate those who worked for us. I listened to my father's business dealings, and I felt the suffocating pressure of being trapped in this gilded cage. I knew I had to escape, but there was no escape without bloodshed. It was in the dead of night, under the flickering light of a single candle, that I made my decision. The midnight rose, a plant so rare, so deadly it could silence even the strongest heart. A single petal, carefully prepared, would slowly stop the pulse, the breath, leaving no trace. I had heard whispers of it as a child, but my mother had always warned me not to meddle with such things. You know, power like that, she said, is not to be played with. But I wasn't playing. I was plotting. The night I decided to kill my family was no different than any other. The wind howled outside and the rain battered the windows as if nature itself was warning me. But I wasn't afraid. I had spent years waiting for this moment. My mother, always so careful, had left the midnight rose petals in the secret pantry, hidden behind jars of spices and dried herbs. They were mine now. I ground the petals into a fine powder, careful not to let a single grain slip away. The smell was subtle, almost floral, but with an underlying bitterness. It was a scent that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The next morning I rose early, the house was still, the workers had not yet begun their daily toil, and the sun had not fully risen. I moved through the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the cold stone floor. I knew every inch of this place. My hands moved quickly, almost instinctively, as I prepared breakfast. Father liked his whiskey strong. Henry adored his pastries, and Mother, well, she always drank her tea. Today they would each get what they deserved. I was so focused on my task that I almost missed it, a noise from behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, only to find my mother standing in the doorway. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than the stern, calculating gaze I had always known. There was something different about her today. "I see you've learned well, Clara," she said softly. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying tension. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" She stepped into the room, her gaze flicking to the powder in my hands. "And you've been preparing for this, haven't you?" I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, but I refused to show any fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." But my mother wasn't fooled. She walked over to the counter, her fingers brushing the edge of the jar where I'd kept the midnight rose petals hidden. She picked it up and examined it with a calmness that unnerved me. "You think you're the only one with a plan, Clara?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You think I haven't been waiting for this moment too?" The weight of her words crashed over me. For the first time in my life, I understood. My mother, the woman who had taught me everything I knew, had been planning this for far longer than I had. The poison, the secret plans, the subtle manipulations. She had been setting the stage for this day, and I had been her apprentice all along. I wanted to run, to leave, but I couldn't. My family was already dying and I was part of it. The house, the estate had become a tomb and we were all its unwilling prisoners. So you've been plotting this too? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. She smiled, a small dark smile that sent chills down my spine. Of course, you didn't think you were the only one with a vendetta, did you? Your father's greed, your brother's cruelty, it was never going to end unless someone stopped it. I've just been waiting for the right moment. She paused as if contemplating something, then added, and now you're ready to join me. The truth hit me like a slap. My mother had never been the victim. She had been the mastermind all along. The poison I had been preparing was not my idea. It was hers. She had shown me how to create the perfect death, how to prepare the perfect revenge, and now I was the one carrying out the plan. But I wasn't the one in control, not anymore. The realization shook me to my core. Was I simply a pawn in her game, or had I truly become the architect of my own revenge? I didn't know. I wasn't sure anymore. But one thing was clear. My family would die today. And after that, after the bloodshed, after the chaos, what would be left? I didn't know, but you, dear reader, can follow this journey with me. Would you have done what I did? Would you seek revenge against those who have tormented you, or would you choose to forgive? Subscribe and stay tuned for the next part. The secrets of Greystone Estate are only beginning to unravel, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The realization that I wasn't the only one who had been plotting sent a jolt through my body. I looked at my mother, no longer the loving matriarch, but a woman who had manipulated me into becoming her accomplice. She knew I was no longer just her daughter. I had become her equal in this twisted game. And yet, despite the fear that clawed at my insides, I couldn't stop. I couldn't back out now. It was too late. You've already started it, Clara, my mother said, her voice colder now. Harder. You've already committed. There's no turning back. The words stung, but they were true. I had already crossed the line. The powder in my hand, the pastries in the oven, the whiskey in the decanter, it was all done. My father would drink, my brother would eat, and soon they would both slip into the sweet embrace of death, oblivious to the evil that had been prepared for them. But that wasn't the end. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, darker was at play here, something more sinister than just revenge. I had wanted to make them pay, but I didn't anticipate the price I would have to pay in return. My own mother had turned this into a far larger scheme than I ever imagined. For a moment, I hesitated. I glanced at the large grandfather clock in the corner of the room, its hands ticking toward the appointed time. When my father would walk in, demanding his morning whiskey, my brother would follow and my mother would serve him his breakfast, all while I stood there knowing what was coming. But my mother wasn't done with me yet. You think you're in control, don't you? She said, as if reading my thoughts. Her eyes gleamed with something I couldn't quite place. You think you've orchestrated this perfectly, but you don't understand, not yet. You don't understand what happens after. What are you talking about? I asked, though a knot was already beginning to form in my stomach. I didn't want to hear this, not now. She stepped closer to me, her voice lowering to a whisper. There's always a price, Clara, and you've set this in motion, but the consequences aren't just for them. They'll come for you too, you'll see. I recoiled, my mind racing. You're lying. This is our family. I'm just finishing what you started. You're wrong, she said softly, almost pityingly. This estate has a life of its own. The Greystone blood runs deep, but it's not just your blood. It's the house, the land. There's something old here, Clara, something that doesn't let go, something you've awakened. Her words gnawed at me like a bitter taste, and for the first time I felt the weight of the estate's history on my shoulders, something ancient, something that had been buried beneath the foundations of the house for centuries, stirred beneath the surface. I had felt it before, those whispers in the walls, the drafts that seemed to come from nowhere, the shadows that shifted when no one was looking. It was as if the house itself was alive. Enough with the theatrics, I said, trying to push the rising unease out of my mind. They'll be gone soon. We'll have everything. My mother stared at me, her eyes darkening. You think you've won? That this is your victory? You don't know the full cost of what you've done. But I didn't want to listen. I turned my back on her, moving toward the dining room, the tray in my hands steady. Despite the storm of thoughts whirling inside me, my heart thudded against my chest as I placed the tray on the table where my father and brother would soon sit. The last step was in motion. The clock struck the hour, its deep chimes reverberating through the house like the tolling of a funeral bell. The door opened with a creak, and my father stepped in, his gruff voice calling for his whiskey. He barely looked at me as I poured him his drink. He never did. My brother followed a moment later, his usual arrogant smirk plastered on his face. He didn't notice the change, the tension in the air. He sat down, eager to feast, to consume, to indulge. This was it, the final act. But just as I prepared to watch them fall, just as I anticipated their faces slackening, eyes glazed, I felt it. A coldness creeping up my spine. The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy and oppressive. The shadows in the walls began to stretch and twist. For a split second, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye, a figure shrouded in black, standing just beyond the doorway, but when I turned, there was nothing there. My heart pounded in my chest, and a shiver ran through me. I had spent years planning this. I had carefully crafted every detail, every move, but now I wasn't sure what I was facing. I felt my mother's presence behind me, her eyes boring into the back of my head. She was watching, waiting. I could hear the faintest sound of her breathing, slow, deliberate. And then, without warning, my father grabbed the glass of whiskey I had just poured for him, slamming it down in one gulp. I watched in disbelief as his face remained unchanged. Nothing. No sudden weakness, no signs of the poison taking hold. My brother followed suit, devouring his meal with gluttonous delight. But again, no reaction, no tremor, no sign of death creeping upon them. Impossible, I whispered, my throat dry. But then the walls seemed to groan, as if the house itself was shifting in response. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the shadows deepened, taking on a shape, an unsettling, almost tangible shape. Suddenly, everything went wrong. The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick with something dark, ancient. My hands trembled as I reached for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered, and in that brief instant, I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, tall, gaunt, its features hidden by a veil of darkness. I spun around to face my mother, who was now staring at me with a look of pure terror. "It's too late," she whispered, backing away. "You've awakened it." "What are you talking about?" I screamed, panic rising in my chest. But before she could answer, the lights went out completely and the room was plunged into darkness. The sound of whispers echoed from all directions. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't in control. To find out what happens next, make sure you're subscribed, because the terror of Greystone Estate is just beginning. The darkness was thick, like a living thing, pressing against me from all sides. The last light had flickered out, leaving me in a void where only the sound of my ragged breathing kept me tethered to reality. I could feel the cold, icy fingers creeping down my spine, numbing my limbs. It was as though the air had turned to glass, each breath a jagged shard scraping the inside of my lungs. I tried to move to escape, but my feet felt like they were stuck in place, as though the ground itself had turned to quicksand. My heart hammered in my chest as I scanned the room, but there was nothing but shadows that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. Then a voice, low, rasping, like it had been dragged across years of dust and decay, spoke from somewhere in the blackness. "You wanted power," it hissed, "but power always demands a price." I froze, my body tensed, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee from whatever this was. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even speak. It was as if the air itself had thickened, suffocating me with an invisible weight. From the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the figure that had been standing in the doorway, the one I had thought was nothing more than a trick of the light. But now it was closer. It was standing right in front of me, and I could make out its shape, tall, thin, its body wrapped in tattered black robes. Its face was obscured by a hood, but I could feel its eyes, cold, piercing, ancient. I wanted to look away, but something in the back of my mind screamed at me to meet its gaze. "You think you can control it," the voice continued, now louder, echoing around me. "You think you can play God, but the game has already started, and the rules, they are not yours to make." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I tried again, forcing my throat to work, but all I could do was choke on the silence that surrounded me. "Look at what you've done," the figure said, its voice now a twisted mockery of my own thoughts. The land you've desecrated, the blood you've spilled, the hunger you've awakened." A rush of memories flooded my mind. The planning, the poisoning, the schemes I had set in motion. I had thought it was simple. I had thought that once my father and brother were gone, I would inherit everything. But this wasn't what I had bargained for. And then I remembered my mother's words, the ones I had dismissed as madness. You've awakened it. The truth hit me like a slap. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just about taking what had been denied to me. No, this was about something far older, something far more dangerous than I had ever realized. I had made a deal with forces I couldn't understand, forces that had been slumbering beneath this house, beneath this land for generations, forces that had been waiting for someone to make the mistake of waking them. And I had made that mistake. The figure stepped closer, its face still hidden, but I could feel its presence all around me now. It was in the air, in the shadows, in the very fabric of the house. The walls groaned as if they were alive, shifting and bending with an unseen power. You've awakened something far more ancient than your petty desires, the figure hissed, and now you will pay. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my legs refused to move. The cold deepened, wrapping around me like chains. I felt my heartbeat slow, each thump dragging me deeper into the abyss. And then, as if summoned by the very words of the figure, I heard it, the faintest sound like a whisper from the deepest corners of the earth. It was coming from below, from the very foundations of the house, a low, rumbling growl like something stirring in the depths of the earth. The figure smiled, if that was even possible, and raised a long, bony hand pointing toward the floor. Do you hear it? It asked. Do you feel it? The growl grew louder, more insistent, shaking the very foundation beneath my feet. The house seemed to tremble with anticipation, as though it were alive, feeding off the fear that had begun to flood through me. And then the floor cracked. It wasn't a gentle crack. It was violent, jagged, as though something massive was trying to force its way up from below. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and the walls trembled as if they might collapse at any moment. The estate was reacting, responding to the awakening of something far older than it had any right to be. I could hear something moving in the dark, something massive, something that I couldn't see but could feel in every fiber of my being. It was coming, and it wasn't pleased. The figure took a step back, watching me with something akin to amusement. It knew what was about to happen. It had been waiting for this moment. You, it said, its voice now tinged with mockery. You wanted control. You thought you could outsmart it, but you were just a pawn in a game much older than you could ever understand. The growl from below intensified, and the floor began to buckle. The very air felt as if it were being sucked down into the earth, and I could hear someone screaming in agony from below. My stomach turned. I knew without a doubt that this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The house, the land, the estate, it was all part of something darker, something that fed off the very souls of those who dared to awaken it. Suddenly the figure's voice rang out loud and commanding. You will suffer for your arrogance, for your greed. The price has been paid, and now you will become part of the legacy. The ground shook violently, and I stumbled, barely managing to keep my balance. My hands shot out to steady myself, but the air felt thick, as though I were sinking into it. The figure stepped back into the shadows, its laughter echoing through the walls. And just before the darkness consumed me entirely, I felt it. A cold, skeletal hand brushed against my shoulder, sending a shockwave of ice through my body. You were never meant to be in control, it whispered, before everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I opened my eyes, the room was silent again. The house had stopped trembling. The growling from below had ceased, but something had changed. The shadows were thicker now, darker, more oppressive. The very air seemed to press against me. I wasn't alone. I could feel it, them watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. The price had been paid, and now there was no turning back. But there was still one thing left to do. I needed to survive. And I needed to escape. If you want to know whether Clara makes it out, don't forget to subscribe, because the journey into the heart of darkness has only just begun. The silence pressed in around me like a suffocating blanket, and for a moment I wondered if the world itself had ceased to exist. I felt as though I were trapped in a place that wasn't quite real, a twisted reflection of the world I had once known. The shadows lingered, thick and oppressive, curling around my limbs like 1,000 unseen hands. I could still hear that faint growl growl from deep within the earth, an animalistic sound that seemed to reverberate through my very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, something ancient and unfathomable, waiting beneath the surface. I struggled to rise, my muscles sore and stiff from whatever had happened in that darkness. My head spun, and a sharp, burning sensation crept up from the back of my neck. I ran my fingers over my skin and flinched as a jagged mark burned across my palm, almost like an imprint, as if something had been branded onto me. I glanced at the floor, expecting to find some sign of the figure or the curse it had whispered about, but nothing. The room was still. My breath was shallow, ragged, as though the air itself had turned heavy, thick with the weight of what had occurred. A strange metallic taste lingered on my tongue, and I realized that I was trembling, my body betraying me in the wake of whatever had just transpired. Then from the corner of the room, a soft whisper floated into my mind, as if the very air around me was alive, speaking without sound. It wasn't a voice I could hear with my ears. It was something far worse, something that reached into my mind, twisting my thoughts, shaping them. "You've awoken the abyss." The words cut through the fog in my mind like a knife. The abyss. I had heard those words before, but I had dismissed them. It was just a myth, a warning passed down through generations to keep the curious at bay. But the figure had spoken of it, and now I realized the truth. The abyss was real. It wasn't just a myth. It wasn't just a legend. It was here in this house. I stood shakily, my legs still weak beneath me, and looked around. The walls seemed to stretch and bend, the angles of the room warping like something out of a nightmare. It wasn't just the shadows that felt wrong, it was the very structure of the place, the house itself. I could feel it now, the pulse of something beneath the floorboards, something alive, something that had been waiting. The growl from below rumbled again, this time louder, more insistent, a deep guttural noise that seemed to shake the very foundations of the estate. The house trembled beneath my feet as if it were alive, and I could feel the walls close in around me. I was no longer in control of this place. It was in control of me. I stumbled toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out. I needed to find answers, but as I reached for the doorknob, the air around me seemed to shimmer, and the temperature dropped even further. It felt as though I had stepped into another realm, a place where time and space no longer held meaning. The door creaked open, revealing the hallway beyond, but the walls were wrong. They weren't the same as I remembered. The wallpaper, once faded and peeling, had turned to something darker, something sinister. The floors, once creaky but familiar, were now slick with a black tar-like substance that seemed to ooze from the cracks in the wood. I couldn't breathe. I felt suffocated by the weight of it all. Suddenly the growling stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, and it made my skin crawl. I turned to look back into the room, but someone was standing in the doorway, a figure cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. It wasn't the same figure I had seen earlier. It was more alive. It radiated a malevolent energy, something that pulled at the very fabric of reality itself. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know if it was the curse or the entity that had been unleashed, but I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer a game. This was survival. The figure stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, and I felt my heart race. It didn't make a sound as it approached, but I could feel the weight of its presence pressing in on me, suffocating me. "You think you can run?" the figure whispered, its voice a distorted echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You think you can escape the abyss? You've already made your choice." I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My body refused to obey me, frozen in place by fear, by the undeniable power of the thing before me. It was as if my very soul was being drawn into its gaze, trapped in the depths of its dark eyes. "You are the price." The words struck me like a blow to the chest. The price. I had heard those words before when I had made the deal with the figure, when I had begun my descent into this madness. I had thought I was taking control, gaining power. But now I understood the truth. The power I had sought came with a cost, one far steeper than I had ever imagined. The figure raised a hand, and the air shifted again, warping and twisting like a living entity. The shadows in the room grew darker, thicker, until they swallowed the space entirely. My body trembled, and I felt my knees give way beneath me. I fell to the floor, my mind spinning as the weight of everything began to crush me. "This is just the beginning, Clara," the figure hissed, its voice slithering into my thoughts. "You are bound to this place, bound to the abyss. There is no escape now." I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as the figure loomed over me, its presence suffocating. And then, with a sudden burst of clarity, I realized something. The curse was never meant to be broken. It was meant to be embraced. The figure's hooded face loomed closer, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The air around me grew even colder, and I could feel the icy tendrils of something reaching into my chest, pulling at my heart. It wasn't just my body that was being consumed, it was my very soul. "You will become one with the abyss," the figure whispered, its voice a promise. "You will be the next to join the legacy." My heart pounded wildly in my chest as the darkness consumed me, pulling me down into the abyss, down into the depths where I would never escape. But as I fell, a strange thought flickered in the back of my mind. Could I fight this? Could I still break free? The question gnawed at me, pulling me back to my senses. I couldn't give up. I couldn't let the abyss consume me. Not yet. If you want to see if Clara can fight her way out of the abyss, make sure to subscribe and follow her journey deeper into the darkness. The answers are coming, but they may cost more than you're ready for. My body felt like it was being torn apart, my mind overwhelmed with the crushing weight of darkness. The abyss was pulling me in, its tendrils snaking around my soul, dragging me into its depths. I could feel the cold, unrelenting grip of the curse tightening around my chest, suffocating me, suffusing me with dread. It was as though my entire being was being unraveled piece by piece. But through the chaos, through the suffocating blackness, one thought cut through like a razor-sharp shard of glass. I could still fight this. The idea seemed absurd. The abyss was too powerful, too ancient. I had seen its might, felt its fury. The figure that had haunted me, the one who called itself the Keeper, had made it clear that I was bound to this place, to its curse. Escape seemed impossible. There was no way out, but there was something inside me, a flicker of resistance that refused to be extinguished. I didn't know what had changed, but I could feel it now. My mind, clouded with the abyss's influence, was fighting back. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to take deep breaths, to anchor myself in something solid, something familiar, and in that moment I realized what I had to do. I had to confront the darkness. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't hide from it. I had to face it head on. The room around me continued to warp, the walls stretching like living skin, the shadows clinging to every surface like they had a mind of their own. The very air seemed to breathe with malevolent intent. Yet I stood, trembling, but resolute. I wasn't going to let this place consume me. A faint whisper echoed in my ears, too soft to be a voice, too close to be an illusion. It was the sound of the abyss itself, the pulse of its insatiable hunger. It spoke to me in fragments, in broken thoughts that clawed at my consciousness. "You can't escape. You can't outrun your fate." I clenched my fists, shaking off the thoughts that sought to drown me. I was not its prisoner. I forced my eyes open, my gaze locking onto the figure that stood before me. It loomed in the doorway, a silhouette bathed in darkness. The Keeper's presence was suffocating, a cold, oppressive force that crushed the air in my lungs. Its eyes gleamed with a predatory light, and for a moment I could see the distorted, flickering image of what it truly was, a creature ancient and twisted, made of shadows and despair. "You cannot defy me," the Keeper whispered, its voice a slithering hiss that seemed to crawl under my skin. "You are mine, Clara. I have already claimed your soul. There is no escape." I took a step forward, defiance burning in my chest. "You're wrong." The Keeper's eyes narrowed, its form flickering, wavering as though it was struggling to maintain its grip on reality. I could feel the energy around us, the pull of the abyss growing stronger, but something was different now. It wasn't as overwhelming, it wasn't as suffocating. I was fighting back. The figure raised a hand and the room trembled with power. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming tendrils that reached toward me, seeking to wrap around my body, to drag me into the abyss. But I didn't back down. I didn't falter. I held my ground, focused on the flicker of resistance deep inside me. With a force of will I didn't know I had, I thrust my hand forward, pushing back against the shadows. The air around me crackled, a surge of energy pulsing through my body, and for a moment the shadows recoiled as if they were afraid. "This is not your domain, Keeper." My voice was strong, even though my body was shaking with the effort. "I am not yours to claim." The Keeper recoiled, its form wavering like a mirage. It hissed in fury, its face contorting with anger. "You dare challenge me!" But I didn't give it a chance to respond. I pressed forward, my hand still outstretched, my heart pounding with a strange, fierce determination. I was no longer afraid. The abyss had tried to consume me, to make me its prisoner, but I would not let it. I would take back control. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I forced the shadows back. The Keeper screamed, a sound of pure rage that reverberated through the house. The walls trembled, and the temperature in the room plummeted as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to win. In a final, desperate act, I hurled myself forward, thrusting my energy into the shadows, into the darkness that had tried to claim me. The world seemed to explode around me, and for a moment I felt weightless, as though I were floating in a vast, endless void. The shadows screamed, their voices rising to a deafening crescendo. Then, with a sharp, explosive burst of energy, the darkness shattered, and I fell. The world came rushing back to me. I was on the floor, gasping for air, my body shaking from the intense surge of energy. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind reeling from the strain of confronting the abyss. But as the dust settled, I realized something. The Keeper was gone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the air was still, the house was quiet, the oppressive weight of the curse had lifted, and the shadows no longer whispered in my ears. The abyss had been driven back. But I knew this was not over. The Keeper may have been banished for now, but the abyss was still there, lingering in the dark corners of my mind. It would return. I knew that. It was only a matter of time before it came back to claim me, to drag me down into its depths. But I had proven something today. I could fight it. The battle wasn't over, but I had won a small victory. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me, but the sense of dread that had plagued me for so long had finally begun to dissipate. I was no longer its prisoner. I wasn't going to let the abyss control me. But now I had a new question. What would I do next? I glanced around the room. The house that had once been my prison, was it still the same, or had I changed it too? Was I still bound to this place, or had I broken its curse? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't leave, not yet. The abyss had shown me just how far I could fall, and there was still more to uncover, still more to learn. The truth was out there, and I would find it. If you're wondering what happens next, make sure to subscribe. The darkness isn't finished with Clara, and neither is her journey. Stay tuned. Since days passed, but the unease never left me. The house had returned to its stillness, but I felt its presence in every corner, in every creak of the floorboards, in the silent hum of the walls. The curse had lifted, or so I thought, but something lingered, a faint whisper, like a breath on the back of my neck. The shadows in the corners of my vision seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was late one night when I noticed the change. The air in the house had thickened again, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. The walls felt closer, as though the house itself was breathing, its pulse quickening in time with mine. My heart raced. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I tried to push it out of my mind. I had faced the Keeper. I had fought the abyss and won. But now a deep sense of dread curled around me like a cold mist. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the Keeper. This was different. Something else was coming. I turned off the lights in the living room, the room that once felt like a safe haven. The flickering of the lamps cast long shadows across the walls, making the room feel smaller, suffocating. I had always tried to keep my mind busy, distracting myself with thoughts of escape, but now it was impossible to ignore the truth. There was something else lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching. Suddenly, the door to the basement creaked open. I froze. The basement. I had avoided it for so long, convinced that whatever lay down there was better left undisturbed, but now it called to me, not in the way the Keeper had called, with promises of eternal darkness, but in a more subtle, insidious way. It beckoned with an emptiness, an invitation to something far worse than I could understand. I didn't want to go down there. I didn't want to face whatever waited, but I had no choice. If I was going to end this, if I was going to truly be free, I had to know what lay below. The stairs were steep, creaking under my weight, the air growing colder with each step I took. My breath came out in a visible cloud, the chill seeping into my skin like the touch of an ice-cold hand. As I descended, the shadows seemed to deepen, the silence growing thicker, more oppressive. Every step echoed, but there was something else in the sound, a muffled whisper, like a faraway murmur speaking my name, Clara. I ignored it. I had to. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept moving. The stairs ended in front of a heavy wooden door, the wood warped with age. It was old, older than anything in the house. I could feel its history pressing against me, heavy and suffocating. I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of doubt, but I had already come too far. I turned the knob. The door creaked open and I stepped into the darkened room. At first, I couldn't see anything. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew hit me like a punch in the gut. The faint glow of the dim hallway light barely illuminated the space before me, but what I saw made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the room, was a mirror. It was old, the glass clouded and cracked, but there was something about it that felt wrong. The edges were gilded with gold, tarnished with age, and the reflection... I didn't see myself. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but when I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat, I realized the truth. In the mirror was not my reflection, but a shadowed figure, a woman, her face obscured by long, dark hair that hung like a curtain over her features. She was standing in the center of the room, her body still, but her presence... palpable. I could feel her in the very air around me, the weight of her gaze on me, even though her face was hidden. The reflection didn't move. It just stood there like a sentinel waiting. I reached out almost without thinking, my fingers brushing against the cold surface of the mirror. The second my skin made contact, a shock of cold surged through me and the room seemed to shift. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched toward me like they were alive, crawling up the walls. The air thickened, pressing in on me. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the panic rising in my throat. I couldn't breathe. The woman's form in the mirror started to distort, her face still hidden, but the darkness around her began to swirl. It was as if the mirror was sucking me in. I stumbled back, tearing my hand away, and the room returned to stillness. The mirror was just a mirror again, its reflection of nothing but my wide-eyed face staring back at me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just touched something that wasn't meant to be touched, that I had uncovered something I shouldn't have. The woman, the shadow in the mirror, was still there. She wasn't just a reflection. She was something else, something ancient, something trapped in that glass, bound by forces I didn't understand. I had to get out of there. I turned and fled, my breath coming in short gasps, my mind racing with questions I didn't have the answers to. What was that thing in the mirror? What had I just done? But as I ran up the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was following me. I reached the top of the stairs, my body shaking, my pulse deafening in my ears. But when I turned to look behind me, the basement door slammed shut. And from behind it, I could hear the whispers. Clara, come back. I stood frozen, unable to move, my heart racing in my chest. What had I unleashed? There was no turning back now. I knew that. The curse had returned, and this time it wasn't the keeper that would drag me down. It was the mirror and whatever was trapped inside. If you want to know more about Clara's descent into the unknown, make sure to subscribe. The truth behind the mirror is only beginning to unfold. Stay tuned for the next chapter. I couldn't sleep. My mind refused to quiet, racing with thoughts of the mirror, of that woman whose face I couldn't see, and of the whispers that seemed to crawl out from the walls. The cold air had settled in my room, but it wasn't the chill that kept me awake. No, it was the growing fear, the nagging feeling that something more was waiting for me, lurking just beyond the surface. I had to understand what was happening. I had to know what the mirror was and what I had uncovered by touching it. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the basement door again. My hand hovered over the handle, trembling. The house seemed to press in on me, suffocating, its silence deafening. Every creak of the floorboards echoed in the stillness, and the house felt alive, watching me. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to go back to the basement, but this time I wouldn't go alone. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed Max. He was the one person I trusted now, the one who had stood by me even when things had gone beyond explanation. The keeper, the shadows, the mirror. None of it made sense, but Max had always believed me, and after everything I had seen, I needed him there. The phone rang for what felt like forever before he picked up. Clara, what's going on? You sound off. I need you to come over now. Max hesitated, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I could hear the concern in his voice. What happened? What's going on in that house? You're scaring me. I can't explain it all on the phone, but there's something in the basement. I don't know what it is, but it's connected to the mirror, to everything. I need you here. There was a long pause before he spoke again. All right, I'm on my way. I hung up and stared at the basement door. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but I knew I couldn't face this alone. The truth was too much, too strange to confront without someone else there, someone who might be able to make sense of it all. When Max finally arrived, I led him downstairs in silence. He looked around the house, his brow furrowing at the heavy atmosphere, the thick layer of dust, the way the air felt stagnant, almost choking. What happened in here, Clara? He asked softly, his voice a mix of awe and concern. It's hard to explain, but whatever it is, it's not over. It's just getting started. I didn't want to scare him, but the truth was I was scared myself. The whispering hadn't stopped since the night before, and every shadow in the house seemed to shift and twitch with life, just waiting for me to let my guard down. But it was the basement that held the key to it all, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. We reached the door at the end of the hall, and I stopped, glancing at Max. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Max nodded, his expression grim but determined. Whatever's down there, we'll figure it out, together. I nodded back, and with a shared look of resolve, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The cold, musty air hit us immediately. The darkness in the basement was suffocating, as if the shadows themselves were alive and reaching for us. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag, the beam of light flickering slightly as we descended the stairs. Every step we took felt heavier, as though we were walking deeper into something we couldn't escape from. When we reached the bottom, I pointed the flashlight toward the mirror. It stood there just as it had the night before, gleaming in the dim light, its surface undisturbed. But now I could feel it. The mirror was calling to me again, its dark, ancient energy radiating outward. Clara, Max said, his voice low, hesitant. Are you sure we should be messing with this? It doesn't feel right. I don't know what else to do, Max. I can't just leave it here, not knowing what's going on. He sighed, stepping closer to me. Then let's figure this out together. I moved toward the mirror, the coldness from its surface biting into the air around me. As my fingers brushed the edge again, the whispers returned, louder this time, echoing in my mind. Clara! I stepped back, a shiver running through me. Max looked at me, his face pale. He had heard it too. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, but he didn't seem as shocked as I was. Instead, he stepped forward, his hand reaching for the mirror as though drawn to it. Max, don't, I warned, my voice frantic, but it was too late. As his fingers brushed against the glass, the room seemed to tilt. The shadows in the corners stretched outward, closing in around us. The air grew colder, suffocating. Max recoiled, his face twisting in pain as though something had just gripped him by the soul. Max, what's happening? I shouted, grabbing his arm, but he was pulling away from me, eyes wide with terror. I can't breathe, he gasped. Before I could react, the mirror seemed to pulse, the shadows swirling, twisting around Max, dragging him toward it. No, Max, I screamed, grabbing his other arm and pulling with all my strength, but it was like trying to pull him out of quicksand. He was slipping, slowly, steadily, his body being dragged toward the mirror, his screams muffled as though the mirror itself was swallowing them. With a burst of desperation, I yanked him one last time, pulling him away from the edge of the mirror, but his hand slipped from mine, and with a final cry, he was pulled back, crashing against the mirror's surface. The glass shuddered violently, the room spinning, and then silence. Max was gone. I stood in the middle of the room, gasping for breath, my mind spinning. What had just happened? Where was he? What had that mirror done to him? I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't think. But one thing was certain now, the mirror had taken him. If you're still with me, you must know one thing. The story doesn't end here. Max may be gone, but I will not stop until I find out how to bring him back. If you want to know what happens next, what secrets the mirror holds, make sure to subscribe and stay with me on this journey. It's far from over, and the truth is more dangerous than we could ever imagine. I stood there in the middle of the basement, staring at the place where Max had been just moments ago. The mirror glistened in the dim light, now eerily still. I could feel the coldness in my chest creeping into my bones, threatening to freeze my heart. Max was gone. Gone, just like that. And I was alone. Alone with a mirror that seemed to be alive and a force I couldn't comprehend. I blinked, shaking my head, hoping that somehow, miraculously, Max would reappear, but the truth was sinking in like a stone in my stomach. He was trapped inside that mirror, and I had no idea how to get him back. The basement felt even colder now. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, inching closer to me, creeping into the corners of my vision. The air was thick with something I couldn't quite name, something heavy, oppressive, as if the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to get out. I had to think. I had to breathe. But the mirror was still there, its surface mocking me, taunting me. I took a deep breath and stepped toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran my fingers over the cold glass again, this time more cautiously, as if expecting it to bite. The mirror had taken Max. It had pulled him in, and I wasn't about to let it do the same to me. But as my hand touched the glass, the whispers began again. Clara. I jerked my hand back, gasping for air, my pulse quickening. The voice was soft, but it carried an undeniable weight. It was the same voice I had heard in my head before, the same voice that had called to me in the darkness. Clara, come closer. I shivered, my legs locking in place. The voice was coaxing, soothing even, but it was a lie. It was a trick, whatever this thing was. It wanted me to let my guard down, to come closer so it could drag me in just like it had Max. I stepped back, but the shadows seemed to follow me, stretching and shifting in the periphery of my vision. The air grew thicker, more suffocating, like a noose tightening around my throat. I could barely breathe, and the darkness felt like it was closing in on me, pressing in from all sides. I had to leave. I had to get out of that basement before I, too, became another victim of whatever this thing was. I turned toward the stairs, but my foot caught on something that wasn't there before. I looked down, a shadow, a hand reaching out from the darkness, its fingers curled in a grotesque imitation of a human form. It was translucent like a wisp of smoke, but it was real, undeniably real. I screamed and stumbled backward, but the hand grasped my ankle, pulling me toward the floor. I kicked and twisted, my heart hammering in my chest, but the grip was too strong. Another hand shot out from the shadows, grabbing my wrist, its fingers cold and clammy, its grip relentless. The whispers grew louder than before, overlapping, a cacophony of voices. They were all around me now, filling my mind, suffocating me. You cannot escape. You will never leave. The mirror will take you. My body was trembling, panic setting in as the hands began to pull me toward the glass, the surface shimmering like liquid. I clawed at the floor, my nails scraping against the cold stone, but it was no use. I was being dragged inch by inch toward the mirror's edge. A final, desperate scream tore itself from my throat, but before I could even process what was happening, I was yanked forward, crashing into the mirror's surface. There was no cold glass, no shattering of the world around me. Instead, I was submerged in darkness, in a vast emptiness that stretched on forever. I couldn't see anything, no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just endless blackness swallowing everything in its wake. And then I heard something, a voice, a whisper. Clara. It was Max, I knew it. I turned, but there was nothing but the dark. The voice echoed again, clearer this time. Clara, you shouldn't have come? My breath caught in my throat. Max? I whispered, but the silence swallowed my words. It's too late, Clara. The mirror, it's not what you think it is. My heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was as if I was frozen in place, my limbs heavy, like they were made of stone. Max, where are you? What's going on? The voice didn't respond this time, but suddenly I felt a pressure, a crushing weight on my chest. It was suffocating, as if the darkness itself was trying to claim me, to pull me deeper into its endless void. And then I saw it. A figure, not Max, not anyone I recognized. It was a silhouette, tall and shapeless, its face obscured by shadows, but it was watching me, waiting, and in its gaze I felt something dark, something ancient, something evil. You shouldn't have come, Clara. The words pierced my mind like a knife. I wanted to scream, but the air in this place was too thick, too heavy. It was all around me, suffocating me, keeping me trapped in this endless void. But the figure stepped closer, and I could feel its presence pressing in on me, its cold energy surrounding me, trapping me in its gaze. And then I realized it wasn't just a figure, it was a reflection of the mirror. I jerked backward, but it followed me, always watching, always waiting. It reached out, its hand extending toward me, and as it did, the darkness seemed to swirl around me, the pressure building, crushing me. I had to get out. I had to get away from it. But where was I? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the echo of Max's voice, faint and distant. Clara, you can't escape. The mirror will claim you too. And then silence. If you're still with me, something has changed. This story, this journey, like it's not just mine anymore, it's ours. Together we'll uncover the secrets behind the mirror, the truth about what's been hiding in the shadows. Make sure to subscribe and keep your eyes open. This story is far from over. I woke up with a jolt, my breath coming in short gasps. My heart was pounding, thumping violently against my ribs. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment I had no idea where I was. Everything around me was pitch black, the kind of dark that made the air feel thick, as if it was pressing against my skin, suffocating me. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, sluggish, like I was stuck in quicksand. My limbs refused to obey, and panic began to claw at my chest. I couldn't breathe. My head spun, and a sense of drowning washed over me, the void surrounding me tighter than ever before. Where was I? The last thing I remembered was being dragged toward the mirror, the hands pulling me in, and then nothing. The void, the endless blackness, the whispers, Max's voice. But now I was somewhere else, somewhere worse. I forced myself to take slow, steady breaths. Focus, Clara, focus. I tried again to move, this time with more determination. My arms, my legs, everything felt like it was encased in lead, but I managed to shift slightly. The air around me was cold, unnaturally cold. It bit at my skin, sending shivers down my spine. And then a flicker of light, a faint glow, barely noticeable at first. It was coming from above, like a tiny distant star. I squinted, trying to focus on it, but the darkness seemed to stretch endlessly, pulling the light further away. But I needed to move. I needed to find out where I was and what had happened to me, to Max. I needed answers. Max, where are you? I whispered his name, but it sounded like the words were swallowed by the oppressive darkness. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, a constant reminder that I was still alive, but for how long? The fear was consuming me, but I couldn't let it take over. I had to survive. With great effort, I pushed myself up, forcing my body to obey, even as every inch of my being screamed in protest. My legs shook, my arms felt weak, but I stood. I was standing in the dark, alone. But I couldn't be alone. Max had to be here. He had to. I forced myself to walk toward the faint light, step by shaky step. The further I moved, the more my surroundings seemed to shift. The darkness was no longer just dark. It had texture, a feeling almost like it was alive. I could hear something faintly scraping, low murmurs, like something moving just out of sight. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted in every direction, but there was nothing, just the blackness closing in on me. I tried to keep moving, but the air felt heavy again, thick with a presence I couldn't explain. It wasn't just darkness, it was something more, something watching, waiting. Focus, Clara, stay focused. I gritted my teeth, willing my legs to move faster. The light above me was getting closer, growing larger with every step, like a beacon in the void. But then something shifted. I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. The light was no longer just a point above me. It was a doorway. A doorway made entirely of the same strange shimmering darkness that seemed to pulse and breathe like it was alive. It warped and twisted in the air, drawing my attention like a magnet. And beyond it, I could see a reflection. Not my own. The figure was tall, shrouded in a dark cloak that moved with a fluidity I couldn't comprehend. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I knew it was watching me, studying me. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, glowed faintly at first, then brighter until the light from them began to burn into my retinas, searing my mind. I staggered back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The reflection stepped forward. No, not just a reflection. This thing, it was a part of the mirror. It was the curse, the force that had been pulling me, pulling Max, pulling everyone into this world of darkness. Clara, The voice was soft, but it reverberated through my mind as if it were coming from within me. Come closer. I froze. The voice was calm, reassuring, a lie, a trap. It wanted me to get closer, to step into the darkness where it could claim me. I shook my head violently, trying to ignore the words, but they continued to echo, growing louder. Clara, you've already crossed the line. There's no turning back now. The reflection extended its hand toward me, its fingers long and skeletal, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. I stumbled backward. I could feel the heat of its gaze, but I couldn't move. My body wouldn't obey. It was like the darkness was reaching out for me, pulling me closer, dragging me into its depths. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the whispers, trying to think. Max, where are you? The reflection's eyes flickered with something. Was it amusement? I couldn't tell. But then the figure did something I hadn't expected. It smiled. A cold, twisted grin spread across its face, stretching unnaturally wide. The shadows around it seemed to grow darker, pulsating with an energy that made the very air around me crackle with tension. I backed away, my pulse racing. No, this can't be happening. The figure reached for me, its hand passing through the space between us. The moment its fingers touched the air, the darkness around me shifted. The blackness seemed to fold in on itself, warping the very fabric of reality. The world twisted like a nightmare, and I felt myself losing control of my body. I fought it. I had to fight it. But the force was too strong. The shadows around me were suffocating me. The reflection reached through the air, grabbing hold of my wrist, pulling me forward into the vortex. And just as the darkness was about to consume me entirely, I heard it, Clara. It was Max. His voice was faint, distant, but it was there. I could feel it, feel the warmth of his presence in the cold void. Clara, you can still get out. You have to fight. You have to destroy the mirror. The darkness pulled harder, but I clung to his words. Destroy the mirror. My heart raced. Was Max trying to help me from within the mirror? Was he still alive? I had to do it. I had to get out. This is not the end, Clara. The darkness pulled me closer, but in that moment I knew what I had to do. I reached out, and with everything I had left, I broke free from the shadows. But the question remained, would it be enough to escape? Only time would tell. Subscribe now to keep unraveling the mystery. Will Clara escape, or will the darkness claim her too? Stay tuned for more. The world around me trembled, as if reality itself was bending, distorting in the wake of my desperate attempt to break free. The darkness clawed at me, tightening its grip, pulling me closer toward the twisted figure, but I was still moving, still fighting, refusing to let the shadows claim me. Max's voice echoed again, faint but strong enough to cut through the suffocating darkness. Clara, you have to destroy the mirror. It's the only way. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of his words settling deep within me. He was right. The mirror was the source of everything, the link that tied this cursed world together. If I didn't destroy it, there was no way out, no way to escape the darkness, no way to free myself. You're Max. With every ounce of will I had left, I focused on the reflection, on the figure that loomed in the darkness, waiting for me to fall into its trap. It grinned, that same wicked, twisted smile stretching across its face. But something was different now. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had a purpose. I had a plan. Max, hold on. I pushed forward, ignoring the overwhelming pressure, the blackness that seemed to seep into my very soul. I could feel the coldness wrapping around my chest, stealing my breath, but I wouldn't stop. I couldn't. The figure reached out again, its skeletal hand closing the distance between us, its fingers curling like claws. Come to me, Clara. I stopped in my tracks, the voice reverberating through my mind. It was so cold, so seductive. A part of me wanted to listen, to give in, the fear, the exhaustion. It was all so overwhelming. But the other part of me, the part that still held on to hope, screamed to fight, to break free. I could feel Max's presence again, his voice grounding me, giving me the strength I needed. You're stronger than this. You know what you have to do. And then it clicked. I knew exactly what I had to do. I turned away from the figure, ignoring the whispers, the tug of the shadows, and forced my eyes to search the blackness, the light, the flickering doorway. It was still there. Beyond it was the mirror. I could see its edge, its shape, faintly reflecting the chaos around me. I had to get to it. I ran faster than I thought possible, each step feeling like it took me farther from the cold embrace of the darkness. I could hear the figure behind me, its mocking laughter echoing in the void, but I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. As I reached the shimmering doorway, the air around me crackled, warping, twisting. The mirror loomed ahead, its surface reflecting nothing but the deep, endless void that surrounded us. But this time, something was different. The reflection was no longer just an empty void. It had shape. It had form. Max. There he was, standing in the reflection, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. He looked almost like he was trying to reach out to me, his lips moving, but no sound came from him. I couldn't hear him, couldn't feel him, just a flicker of his presence like a ghost trapped in the mirror. Max! I reached out, my fingers brushing the surface of the mirror. The coldness shot through me like an electric current, freezing my bones, numbing my senses. But I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The mirror's surface rippled like water, shifting beneath my touch. The reflection of the world around me began to distort, bending in unnatural ways. The shadows inside the mirror began to writhe, as if the mirror itself was alive. I slammed my hand harder against the glass, feeling it crack beneath my touch. It was as if the mirror was holding me, trapping me within its glassy prison, keeping me from breaking free. I have to do this. The words were a mantra repeating over and over in my head. The voice, the reflection, the darkness, it was all a trap. I wasn't just fighting for my own life anymore. I was fighting for Max, for everyone who had ever been pulled into this nightmare. And then with a surge of adrenaline, I pulled my hand back and punched the mirror. The glass shattered with a violent crack, sending shards flying in all directions. The impact was deafening, the sound of breaking glass resonating in my ears, shaking my entire body. For a split second, everything was still. Then the void erupted. The darkness twisted violently, the shadows expanding, folding in on themselves like an explosion. The world around me began to fragment, disintegrating into jagged, shifting pieces. The floor beneath my feet cracked open, and I was falling. I reached out, desperate to grab hold of anything, but there was nothing, just the void swallowing everything in its path. I could hear Max's voice again, faint but clear, calling my name. But it wasn't enough. The darkness consumed me, pulling me under, pulling me apart, and for a brief moment, I thought I was lost forever. And then in the depths of the void, I saw it. The faintest glimmer of light. I stretched out my hand, reaching for it, for whatever was left of hope, and as my fingers grazed the light, the world around me snapped. Suddenly, once I was outside. The air was fresh, the sunlight bathed my face, the world felt real again. I gasped, sucking in a deep breath of air. The weight of the darkness was gone, the void was gone. But Max, I turned, searching for him, my heart pounding in my chest. The world was quiet, too quiet. The mirror was gone, but so was he. I looked around, trying to piece together the fragments of what had just happened. Had I really escaped, or was this just another layer of the nightmare? I didn't know, but I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to stop until I had all the answers, until I knew what had happened to Max, until I understood why I'd been pulled into this world in the first place. The journey wasn't over. It couldn't be. What will happen next? Will Clara uncover the truth, or will the darkness find its way back to claim her? Subscribe now, because this story is far from finished. The world felt too quiet, too perfect. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I was free. The sunlight pouring through the trees, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, it all felt so normal, too normal, but somewhere deep inside, I knew it wasn't right. Nothing about this felt right. I turned around slowly, scanning the surroundings. Everything looked like it should. Green grass, blue sky, distant mountains, but there was an odd stillness to it all. The air was heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for me to realize something. I wasn't alone. I could feel it, a presence in the distance, something familiar and yet alien, like an echo of the past. My pulse quickened, a knot forming in my stomach. Max. I was sure of it. The feeling, the pull had to be him. The voice in my head that had guided me, the one that had reminded me of who I was and what I needed to do. He had to be somewhere. He had to. Max! My voice cracked as I shouted into the open space, but there was no reply, just the emptiness surrounding me. I took a step forward, but as soon as my foot hit the ground, the world shifted. The sky darkened, clouds swirling in unnatural patterns above me. The once peaceful breeze turned into a violent gust, tugging at my clothes, pulling me in every direction. The ground beneath me began to tremble, cracking open like the surface of ice, revealing deep, inky shadows below. It was happening again. I stumbled back Heart racing, my breath came in shallow gasps as I realized what was happening. The void, the mirror, it was all starting to bleed back into the world. The darkness had found me again. Before I could react, the shadows rose up, twisting into shapes I couldn't comprehend. They moved like smoke, like liquid night, swirling around me, drawing closer. And then, from within the shadows, a figure emerged. Max, but it wasn't him. The figure that stood before me had his face, his eyes, but it was twisted, corrupted. His features were distorted, stretched beyond recognition. The smile on his face was wrong, wide, and malicious. Max? I whispered, my voice barely a tremor against the overwhelming presence of the figure. The creature, or whatever it was, tilted its head slightly, a mocking glint flashing in its eyes. Then, in a voice that was both his and not his, it spoke. Claire, you really thought you could escape? I took a step back, my legs trembling beneath me. The air felt thick, suffocating. No, this isn't real. But it was real. The creature, Max, stepped forward, its distorted figure moving with unnatural speed. I wanted to run, to escape, but my body wouldn't move. The shadows pulled at my limbs, at my very soul, holding me in place. You can't escape, Clara. You never could. It was too much. The darkness, the twisted version of Max, the crushing weight of everything I'd experienced so far. I felt myself slipping again, falling into the same trap I had just escaped from. But then something changed. I felt a rush of warmth, a flicker of light deep inside me, the same feeling I had when I shattered the mirror, the same feeling of purpose, of strength. The warmth spread through me like fire, pushing back the cold, the darkness. I'm not afraid of you. The words came from somewhere deep inside me, raw and steady. I wasn't afraid anymore. The creature laughed, but the sound was hollow, almost scared. You should be. With a surge of energy, I pushed forward, breaking free from the shadows that held me. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life toward the figure, toward the creature that had once been Max. It reached out with its claws, but I was already past it. The creature howled, a sound that tore at the fabric of reality itself, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The warmth inside me grew stronger, more powerful, like a beacon in the dark. I could feel the darkness retreating, like it was being pushed away by my very presence. The figure that had once been Max screamed again, its voice echoing around me, but I didn't look back. I reached the center of the field where the ground had cracked open, the rift into the void still yawning wide before me. But this time I wasn't afraid. I wasn't running from the darkness. I was running toward it. The creature behind me seemed to hesitate, unsure of what was happening, but I didn't wait for it. I leapt into the rift, into the darkness, knowing this was my final chance, my only chance. And then just as I passed the threshold, the world exploded. A blinding light filled my vision, a wave of pure energy that hit me like a tidal wave. I screamed, but there was no sound, no air to breathe. The force of it tore through me, pulling me apart piece by piece. But then it stopped. I gasped for air, the light fading as I slowly opened my eyes. The rift had closed. The darkness had been pushed back, sealed away. I was back. But this time it wasn't just the world that had changed. I had changed. I stood in the middle of a vast, desolate landscape, the remnants of the rift still swirling in the sky above me. The world was quiet still, and in that stillness I knew one thing with certainty. This was not the end. The darkness had not been defeated. It had only been delayed. And now the real battle was about to begin. Will Clara survive this time? Can she truly defeat the darkness, or will it consume her once and for all? The truth is out there, but it's not what you think. Subscribe now to uncover what comes next. The fight isn't over, not yet. The landscape around me was eerily still, like the calm before a storm. I stood there trying to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The ground beneath me was cracked, a jagged wound in the earth where the rift had once been, and I was different now. I could feel it in my bones, in the very essence of who I was. It wasn't just the darkness that had changed. I had changed too. A flicker of light appeared in the distance, faint but growing stronger. I didn't hesitate. I knew what it meant. It was a signal, a sign that someone was waiting for me, and this time it wasn't Max. I moved toward the light, my steps quick and purposeful. Every part of me was on edge, aware of the weight of what was about to happen. The world felt like it was stretching, as though the fabric of reality itself was about to snap. The closer I got to the light, the more I felt the pull, a magnetic force that urged me forward, that whispered to me, urging me to unlock whatever was hidden within me. And as I approached, I saw the figure standing at the center of the light, a woman, tall and regal, with eyes that burned like fire and hair that flowed like liquid silver. She was wearing a cloak made of shadows, but unlike the ones I had seen before, this one was not suffocating. It felt alive, breathing, shifting with every movement. Her gaze fixed on me as I approached, and for the briefest moment I thought I saw something familiar in her eyes, something that pulled at me, that made me feel as though I had seen her before, but I knew that couldn't be right. I had never met her. "You've come," she said, her voice like the rustle of leaves in a storm. It was both soothing and terrifying. "I wondered when you would arrive." I didn't answer at first. I was too busy trying to process the situation. Who was she? What did she want with me? And why did I feel like this moment had been written in the stars, destined to happen? "I don't understand," I finally said, my voice shaky. What is all of this? What happened to Max?" She smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was knowing, cryptic, like she held all the answers, but wasn't ready to give them to me yet. "Max," she murmured. "Poor Max. He was never meant to be the hero of this story. You were always meant to be." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, my head spinning. The world felt like it was tilting beneath me, the ground shifting in strange, impossible ways. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice a mere whisper now. "I don't understand. Max was everything to me. He was the one who helped me. He showed me the way." The woman's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Max was a tool," she said, her tone almost pitying, "a pawn in a game much larger than either of you could comprehend. The darkness, the rift, they were never just about him. They were always about you." I shook my head, trying to push her words away. No, that's not true. Max, he chose to protect you," she interrupted, her gaze sharp. "But that choice came at a price. He didn't know that in saving you, he was condemning himself. The darkness knows no mercy, Clara, and it never forgets." My breath caught in my throat. The weight of her words settled on me like a heavy stone. The darkness, it had been after me all along. Max had been a shield, a decoy. I had never been the innocent victim I thought I was. I had always been part of this, a piece in a puzzle I had never understood. "Why am I here?" I asked, the question finally slipping from my lips. What do you want from me?" She looked at me, her eyes burning with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I want nothing from you, Clara, but I need you to understand the truth. You're not just a survivor. You're the key, the one who holds the power to either destroy or save everything." I was silent for a long time, trying to absorb the weight of her words. The key. I had always felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of me I couldn't reach, a power that was just out of my grasp. But now I was beginning to realize what it was. I was the one who could end this. The realization hit me like a wave crashing over me, pulling me under. But instead of drowning, I swam. I swam toward the knowledge that had always been inside me. I had the power to destroy the darkness, to end it once and for all. But at what cost? The woman seemed to sense my inner turmoil. She stepped closer, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "You can't hesitate, Clara. Time is running out. The darkness is already spreading, already shifting, and soon there will be nothing left to save. The world is in your hands." I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, the weight of the responsibility almost too much to bear. Her eyes softened just for a moment. "You don't have to do it alone. You never were alone. Max, the others, they are with you. They always will be. But you must take the first step. You must face the darkness, confront it, or it will consume everything." I swallowed hard, the cold knot of fear tightening in my chest, but I didn't have a choice. If I didn't face this, if I didn't end it now, the world would be lost. "Where do I begin?" I asked, my voice steadier now. The woman smiled, the fire in her eyes flickering with approval. "You already know. The answer is inside you, Clara. The darkness doesn't just exist in the world. It exists within you, too. Only you can decide whether to embrace it or destroy it." As she spoke, I felt it, like the darkness stirring inside me, like a dormant creature waking up, stretching its limbs. It wasn't just an external force. It was part of me now, a part I could never fully escape. The question wasn't whether I could destroy it. It was whether I could control it. Can Clara face the darkness inside her and save the world, or will it consume her as it has consumed so many others? The answers are closer than you think, but they come with a price. Subscribe now to witness Clara's ultimate choice. The journey has just begun. The ground beneath me trembled, a subtle vibration that resonated through my bones. The air around me grew heavier, thicker, like the very atmosphere was alive with anticipation. My thoughts were a tangled mess, racing from one question to the next, unable to catch hold of any single answer. I felt the weight of the woman's words pressing down on me, every syllable a reminder of what was at stake. See, I turned my gaze back to her, the enigmatic figure in the cloak of shadows. Her eyes burned with an intensity that made my chest tighten. She was waiting for me, expecting me to make the next move, to choose the path that would determine everything. You say I'm the key, I said, my voice steadier now, despite the storm of emotion swirling within me. But what if I don't want this? What if I'm not the one who can stop it? The woman's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You were chosen, Clara, not by me, not by fate, but by something far older. The darkness has always been a part of this world, and so have you. You have the strength to face it, to challenge it, and to change everything, but it's not going to be easy. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Her words felt like a pressure, as if I was being pushed toward an inevitable end. But how could I fight something like this, something that had been in the world for as long as I could remember, something that had been inside me, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to awaken? Why me? I asked again, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Why was I chosen? There has to be someone else who can do this, someone better suited for it. She shook her head slowly, the shadows of her cloak shifting around her like a living thing. You've always had the power, Clara, even when you didn't know it. It's a part of you, woven into your very soul. The darkness has always been drawn to you because you are both its opposite and its equal. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I tried to wrap my mind around the idea that I had been marked, that this had all been set in motion long before I ever understood what was happening. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The strange things I'd experienced, the visions, the inexplicable connection I had felt with the world's shadows, it had all been leading up to this moment. I don't feel like I'm ready for this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a girl trying to survive. I don't have the answers. I don't even know how to fight this darkness. How can I? You will learn, she replied, her voice soft but firm. You have more strength than you realize. It's not about knowing everything, Clara. It's about understanding the choices in front of you and the consequences of those choices. The darkness isn't a force you can simply banish. It's a part of the world. It's in the earth, the sky, the very fabric of reality, but it's also in you. And until you face it, until you learn to control it, you will never be free. Her words echoed in my mind, the gravity of them sinking in. The darkness wasn't just an enemy to defeat. It was a part of the world, a part of me. And to overcome it, I had to understand it. I had to accept it. But how could I accept something that terrified me? I stared at the woman, trying to find any hint of reassurance in her face. How do I control it? How do I stop it from consuming everything? She studied me for a long moment, as if weighing my soul. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time, as if she were sharing a secret. The darkness feeds on fear, Clara. It thrives on it, but fear is not something to be destroyed. It's something to be understood. You must confront your own darkness, the parts of you that you fear the most. Only then will you have the strength to face the larger darkness that threatens the world. I didn't understand at first. Confront my own darkness? What did that even mean? How could I face something I didn't even fully comprehend? But as the words lingered in the air, something inside me stirred, a spark of recognition. I'd always known there were parts of me that I had avoided, buried deep down, the anger, the guilt, the shame, the feelings I had never known how to process, the feelings I had buried so far beneath the surface that I had forgotten they were even there. Maybe that was what I needed to do. Face those parts of myself that I had hidden away, acknowledge them, understand them, and maybe, just maybe, that would be the key to controlling the darkness. You're telling me I need to face my own fears, I said slowly, the realization dawning on me. Like, that's how I fight it? The woman nodded, her expression unreadable. Yes, but it won't be easy. The darkness will fight back. It will try to make you doubt yourself, to make you afraid of your own power. You must be stronger than that, stronger than the fear it tries to provoke. My heart was racing now. Fear. That was what had always held me back. Fear of what I could become, fear of what I might lose, fear of the power I didn't understand. But if this was the way forward, if facing my own darkness was the only way to stop the larger darkness from consuming everything, then I had no choice. I don't know if I can do this, I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound confident. I'm scared. The woman smiled, though it was a sad smile, as though she understood. That's the first step, admitting your fear. The next step is to choose how you respond to it. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling at my sides. I had no idea how to control the darkness inside me, how to face the parts of myself I had kept hidden for so long, but I knew this. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't exist. I had to confront it. I had to face my own fears, my own shadows. I had to take control. The woman's figure began to fade, the shadows shifting around her like smoke. Remember, Clara, she said, her voice growing fainter. The darkness isn't just something to fight, it's something to understand. Only then will you have the power to choose. And then she was gone. I was left standing alone in the silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The darkness was still there, swirling just beneath the surface, waiting for me to face it. It wasn't just the world I had to save, it was myself. The real battle was about to begin. Will Clara conquer her own darkness, or will she be consumed by it? The journey to control the shadows has just begun. Stay tuned. The next chapter's coming. Subscribe now to join Clara on her journey. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth as I walked deeper into the woods, each step seeming to echo off the ancient trees around me. The shadows were longer here, more pronounced, stretching out like fingers reaching for me. It was as though the woods themselves were alive, watching, waiting. My skin prickled with the feeling of being followed, though when I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing but the same shifting darkness. I had spent the past few days trying to make sense of the woman's cryptic words. Face my own darkness. What did that even mean? Like, how could I confront something I couldn't even fully understand? It was easier to tell myself it was some metaphor, some vague piece of wisdom to make me feel better, but I knew it wasn't. I could feel the truth in every bone of my body. The darkness wasn't just some abstract thing. It was a part of me, something buried so deep that I had spent my entire life avoiding it. The air around me seemed to shift again, and I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear something, a whisper just on the edge of my hearing, like a distant murmur carried by the wind. I strained my ears, trying to make sense of the words. Clara, come closer. I didn't need to be told twice. Something inside me stirred, a compulsion I couldn't resist. I stepped forward, my feet moving almost on their own accord, drawn toward the source of the voice. The further I went into the forest, the heavier the air became, until it was like wading through thick fog, each breath a struggle. And then through the trees, I saw it, a mirror. It was a large, ornate thing, standing in the middle of the forest as though it had been placed there deliberately. The glass was dark, almost like a pool of ink, reflecting nothing but the shadows around it. The frame was twisted, like it was made from gnarled branches, twisted and warped as though the forest itself had created it. The whispers grew louder, clearer now, as if they were coming from the mirror itself. Look into the glass, Clara. Look into your soul. I hesitated, a deep sense of unease gnawing at my insides, but my feet, again, betrayed me. They moved on their own, bringing me closer to the mirror. As I reached out to touch the cold surface, I felt a jolt of energy, like an electric shock, surge through me. The mirror rippled like water, the darkness inside it swirling in strange patterns. And then I saw it. A version of myself, but not quite. This version of me was twisted. Her eyes were hollow, empty, a reflection of the fear and anger that I had buried inside for so long. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was a smile of malice, of knowing something I didn't. The reflection moved, mimicking my every action, but with an eerie delay, like it was mocking me. Do you see now? The voice in the mirror whispered. This is who you are. This is who you could become. I stepped back, my heart racing. My reflection was still smiling, its grin widening, stretching unnaturally across its face. It wasn't just a reflection. It was something else, something dark and hungry. You're lying, I whispered to the mirror, my voice trembling. This isn't me. This isn't who I am. But the reflection just laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that sent chills down my spine. You lie to yourself every day, the reflection said, its voice now a low growl. You bury the parts of you that you fear, the anger, the guilt, the rage, the darkness inside you wants to be free, Clara, and one day it will be. Just like me. The reflection's eyes locked with mine, and I felt a surge of cold wash over me. It was as though I was being pulled into the mirror, the darkness reaching out to claim me. Stop, I shouted, taking another step back, but it was no use. The pull was too strong, and before I could stop it, I felt myself falling forward, my body crashing into the mirror. The world around me seemed to shatter, the forest, the trees, the very ground beneath me breaking apart like glass. Everything dissolved into darkness, leaving only the reflection of myself still standing there, smiling. But it wasn't just my reflection anymore. It was me, my true self, the self I had buried for so long. I was no longer in the woods. I was in a place that felt wrong. The air was thick, suffocating, and the ground beneath my feet was slick with something I couldn't identify. The only light came from the strange flickering glow that seemed to pulse from within the mirror, and in the distance I could hear the whispers again, louder now, a chorus of voices calling my name. Clara. I turned, but there was no one there. Only darkness, stretching endlessly in every direction. You've entered the void now, a voice said from behind me, and I spun around to see the reflection standing just a few feet away. Her face was twisted in a grin, her eyes wide and gleaming with madness. You're inside your own mind, she said, her voice mocking. The darkness isn't something outside you, Claire. It's inside. It's always been inside, and now you have to face it. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble, and suddenly I felt a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. The darkness seemed to close in around me, tightening like a vice. I gasped for air, but it felt like my lungs were filled with sand. What do you want from me? I managed to choke out, my voice weak and strained. The reflection smile faded, replaced by something darker, more knowing. I want you to see the truth, to accept who you really are. The darkness inside you isn't something to fear. It's a part of you, just like the light. And once you accept it, you will have the power to control it, to control everything. I shook my head, backing away from her. No, I don't want this. I don't want to become you. The reflection laughed, a sound that echoed through the void. You already are me, Clara. You always have been. And then everything went black. I woke up gasping for air, my body drenched in cold sweat. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was trembling all over. The darkness still clung to me even in the waking world. But I knew one thing now. The darkness wasn't just an enemy. It wasn't just something to fight. It was me, and it was time to face it. The true battle begins now. Will Clara learn to control the darkness within her, or will it consume her completely? Find out in the next chapter. Subscribe now to keep up with the journey. The story is only beginning. I couldn't shake the image of the mirror, the twisted reflection of myself, its eyes gleaming with malice. When I woke up, the room was suffocatingly silent, save for the rhythmic pounding of my heartbeat. I could still feel the weight of the void pressing down on me, that suffocating darkness, even though I was back in my own bed. The walls felt too close. I sat up, clutching the sides of the bed, trying to steady my breath. I needed to clear my head. But there was a voice in the back of my mind, soft and insistent, urging me to return to the mirror to face what I had left behind. No, I whispered to myself, shaking my head. I can't go back. I'm not ready. But the more I resisted, the louder the voice became, like a siren calling me to the depths of the ocean. The thought of confronting that darkness terrified me, but there was something else too, a pull, a need to understand, a need to prove that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't afraid. But what if I was? The phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and my stomach churned when I saw the name, Sophie. I hadn't talked to Sophie in days. Ever since the night I ran from the woods, I'd kept everyone at arm's length. She was the only one who could see through my defenses, the one person who would know something was wrong. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Clara, Sophie's voice was thick with concern. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you. I'm fine, I lied, my voice shaky. I just needed some time alone. Alone? She repeated, her tone sharp. Clara, I've been worried about you. You don't just disappear like that and not tell anyone where you're going. What happened? Talk to me. I bit my lip, the weight of the secret pressing on me. I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. I had a lot on my mind, I said, forcing a smile, though she couldn't see it. But I'm okay, really. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could feel her hesitation. She didn't buy it. But she didn't push either. Well, if you're sure, she said slowly, just don't shut me out, okay? I'm here if you need to talk. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I know. Thanks, Sophie. I ended the call quickly, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I couldn't help but wonder if Sophie knew somehow that something was wrong, that something had changed in me. The thought lingered, gnawing at my insides, but I shook it off. I needed to focus. There were more pressing matters at hand. The mirror, the darkness. What if it wasn't just a reflection? What if the pull, the call I had felt wasn't just in my head? What if the forest was calling me for a reason? I got out of bed and moved to the window, staring out at the quiet street below. The night was thick, the sky covered in clouds, hiding the stars. Everything was too still, too silent. Then I saw it, a figure moving in the shadows. I blinked, unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me. The figure disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed up by the darkness of the night. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. I couldn't wait any longer. The mirror was calling me. I had to go back. I grabbed my jacket and ran out the door, my heart pounding in my chest with a mix of fear and anticipation. The night air was cool against my skin, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside me. Every step I took felt like a step closer to something I couldn't understand, something I couldn't control, but there was no turning back now. I reached the edge of the woods in what felt like no time at all. The trees loomed above me, casting long, gnarled shadows across the path. The wind rustled through the branches, whispering like voices carried on the breeze. I'd been here before, but this time the forest felt different, darker, more oppressive. It was as though it was waiting for me, too. The mirror had to be somewhere in the heart of the woods, but I wasn't sure how I knew that. The pull, the compulsion had brought me here without question, without hesitation. It was like someone was guiding me, urging me forward. And then I saw it. The mirror stood tall in the clearing, just as I had left it, the twisted frame shimmering faintly in the pale moonlight. But something was different this time. The reflection wasn't just distorted, it was alive. I approached cautiously, my every instinct screaming at me to turn and run, but I couldn't. I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. As I stood before the mirror, I saw her again, the twisted version of myself, but this time she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were wide, filled with rage, and her mouth twisted into a snarl. She raised her hand as though beckoning me closer, her movements jerky, unnatural. "Clara," she hissed, her voice low and guttural. "You've come back. You're finally ready to face what you've been running from." I took a step back, fear bubbling up in my throat. I don't want this. I don't want to be you. The reflection's grin returned, only this time it wasn't the mocking, cruel smile from before. It was something darker, something that seemed to grow, filling the space between us. The glass of the mirror rippled, shifting like water, as though the very fabric of reality was bending around it. "You can't escape who you are," the reflection whispered. "Not anymore. The darkness is part of you, Clara. You know it. You've always known it." I shook my head, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. I couldn't move. "You can either accept it," the reflection murmured, its voice growing louder, "or let it consume you." And then the world around me began to crack. The trees shattered like glass, the ground beneath my feet splintering apart. The reflection was no longer just in the mirror. It was all around me, her presence overwhelming, suffocating. "You have a choice," the voice whispered, now all around me. "Embrace the darkness, or be lost in it forever." The ground gave way beneath me, and I fell, falling into the abyss. That fateful morning, I walked into the grand dining room and found them sprawled across the table, father, mother, and my cruel brother, silent, their mouths frozen in a final scream. The air was thick with death, and all I had left was my steady hands to clean the table. I still hear their voices in my head, each one a whisper in the dark. They never knew what was coming, but I did. I had planned every detail down to the last drop of poison. This house, the Greystone Estate, wasn't just home. It was a fortress, its walls lined with secrets that no one dared speak of. My name is Clara, and I was raised in the shadows of a family that never valued me. My father, a man of power and influence, saw me as nothing more than an afterthought. My mother, the house's head cook, was a woman whose sharp eyes always seemed to know more than she let on. And my brother Henry, he was a monster, cold, calculating, and cruel. He tormented the workers, mocked them, and left them broken. But he didn't break me. I was raised on the art of food, but not in the way you think. My mother didn't just teach me to cook, she taught me to poison. She was the true master of Greystone's secret kitchens, and I was her apprentice. She knew every herb, every plant, every dangerous substance in this garden, in this place, even beauty could kill. Growing up, I never saw myself as a victim. I was the quiet one, the observer, but I watched. I watched Henry humiliate those who worked for us. I listened to my father's business dealings, and I felt the suffocating pressure of being trapped in this gilded cage. I knew I had to escape, but there was no escape without bloodshed. It was in the dead of night, under the flickering light of a single candle, that I made my decision. The midnight rose, a plant so rare, so deadly it could silence even the strongest heart. A single petal, carefully prepared, would slowly stop the pulse, the breath, leaving no trace. I had heard whispers of it as a child, but my mother had always warned me not to meddle with such things. You know, power like that, she said, is not to be played with. But I wasn't playing, I was plotting. The night I decided to kill my family was no different than any other. The wind howled outside and the rain battered the windows as if nature itself was warning me, but I wasn't afraid. I had spent years waiting for this moment. My mother, always so careful, had left the midnight rose petals in the secret pantry, hidden behind jars of spices and dried herbs. They were mine now. I ground the petals into a fine powder, careful not to let